Hi, folks. I am Larry Winget, the pit bull of personal development and 6 times New York Times, Wall Street Journal best-selling author. Today, I am here with Linda Jordan. Linda, welcome.
Thank you, Larry. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. All right, Linda, tell us all what you do for a living.
Sure. Well, what I do is I help entrepreneurs, I help organizations, for-profit and nonprofit. I help them increase employee engagement by providing leadership skills, communication skills, and most importantly, diversity, equity, and inclusion training so that employees can be much more productive, and therefore productivity increases profits, which is that company's bottom line.
You know, the biggest challenge that I hear from small businesses, and I've coached a lot of them for a lot of years and spoken to many, many of them. The biggest challenge they talk to me about is getting employee buy-in to what they want to have happen in the organization. And they're always saying, how do I increase buy-in? Do you deal with that?
Yes, absolutely. Because when an employee is not engaged, then they're not going to buy into anything that the company's doing because they feel that their opinions are not counted or they're not being included in those discussions. So they're not going to buy into any changes in the organization. And today with COVID restrictions, they're having to now buy into going back into the workplace. And they're a little reluctant because, you know, today employees want to stay at home. So rather than buying into the company and being a little bit more flexible and figuring out how the company's going to work with them, unfortunately, a lot of them are opting to, you know, take their bag and go home and find another job.
Most of them are already at home. And
Yeah.
that's what I think. I think that's part of the challenge. I've really been concerned about business over the last year and a half or so. I know it's hard to engage people when you're sitting across the desk from them every single day. Right. And the challenge of having to do it when they're working from home and they're on a screen this big, just maybe for a morning meeting or something, how do you address those kinds of issues that every business right now is dealing with?
So the way I address those issues is that I encourage leaders to do what they did in the office, which is have office hours virtually, make themselves available so that their employees can log on to a Zoom at a certain time, just like they would in the office. They'd stop by and say, you have 5 or 10 minutes. They need to do the same thing so that employees feel more engaged, because you're right. It's hard for people to be sitting at home, you know, in their jammies and working, and then, you know, they're not hoping or expecting anybody to say, let's have a Zoom meeting, because they're kind of like doing their own thing. But leaders have to go that extra step to engage and invite those employees into the office virtually.
Instead of an open door policy, have sort of an open Zoom policy.
Yes.
Then, right?
Absolutely.
So how is this costing companies? I know companies, and they only do everything's about the bottom line. And until a company understands this is costing them, they're not going to do anything. How is this costing them?
Well, 2020 research showed from Accenture, they did a study. Number one, Accenture study showed there was $1 trillion in the perception gap about employment and diversity and engagement. And Accenture's study also showed that it's costing companies $500 billion. Well, it cost them in 2020 because of employee disengagement. That means, you know, people they're not productive. They're doing other things. And so companies are having to work twice as hard. They're having to hire more people because people are leaving. They've got to retrain, and it's costing them a ton of money, and they've got to figure it out quickly.
New employees always cost you a whole lot more than the employee you got. So if you can take advantage, and I don't mean by taking advantage, but take advantage of utilizing the employee you have, that automatically has impact on the bottom line, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you're retaining that talent, you're retaining all that knowledge, you're not having to retrain, and you're not having to re-immerse someone into the corporate culture. And so all of that costs, and it costs a lot of money.
I also think that we see a lot of people job hopping right now because there are lots of jobs available.
There are a lot.
Job hopping, if they don't feel engaged here, those bright, shiny objects will get their attention and they'll bail and go to somebody else.
Oh yeah, I call it they're in squirrel mode, you know. They're just hopping around because they're trying to find a company that is going to resonate with them, that makes them feel that their opinions are valued. They're looking for someone or a leader who's going to show that they care about them as a person. And people with COVID, unfortunately, well, fortunately, it allowed people at home to realize what was most important to them. And hopping in the car, driving a 9 to 5, a lot of people realized that just wasn't cutting it. They needed to spend more time with their families, their children, and some people are homeschooling now. And so that has just sort of changed the dynamics of going into the office.
You know, I've seen a big shift in the last couple of years too, and in businesses and employers thinking that people cared more about money than any other thing. And right now we see the mistake of businesses offering signing bonuses and a few more dollars an hour. And that stuff's not working either. No. And most of the studies I'm reading, and I'm sure you address this, is that people aren't attracted to more money. They are attracted to being valued.
Yes.
And that's what you work with companies to help them value their employees and show it. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. I mean, and you know, I have a daughter who's 27, and I'm having that same conversation with her because she's a millennial and she's having to deal with that same thing. So trying to address that gap with companies is a little challenging because it's causing them to rethink differently than they've ever done before. I'm a baby boomer, so for me, my job was just get up and go to work every day and do whatever was told and, make it work. Rain, show, shine, or sleep like the postman. But today, the younger population thinks very differently, and their values are different than what, some of the corporate leaders are. So we have to meet people where they are. And right now, that's the struggle, having to meet people, the newer, younger generation, having to meet them where they are. And that's more about their own personal beliefs and values, what's important to them, getting up in the morning and having time to play with their children or take the dog for a walk, not getting up at 6 and hopping to a 9 to 5 or hopping on a Zoom. They're looking for more. And you're right, that dollar or dale in that bonus is not going to cut it.
You know what you said, I'm a boomer as well. And I think it's a challenge for boomers to be able to relate to millennials based on what you just said. We just have a different style of work ethic. It's not that they're lazy and they get labeled. People get labeled as a lot of stuff, as lazy and a lot of stuff. They value things differently. And if we don't understand that as employers, and by the way, it works the other way. We have a lot of boomers who are now working for millennials.
Yes.
And there's that disconnect. And I hear a lot from old guys working for young women, and they're going, I can't communicate. And so that's also part of diversity, covers a lot of things, doesn't it?
It does. And the communication styles are so different. And so one of the things I also share with leaders is, there's a DISC assessment that talks about everybody's communication style and behaviors. So I invite leaders to, do that assessment with their teams so they can understand how to communicate better. Because, I may communicate one way or perceive that someone else is communicating another, and we're going to miss each other like crazy because I'm thinking one thing and they're thinking another. Or that body language, we pick up on body language, and that plays into it as well. So, it's a struggle. And yes, you are correct that the baby boomers are now working for the millennials, and it's hard. And most recently, studies have shown that the people in the workforce right now are the baby boomers. We retired and now we're going back to work.
I just saw a news report this morning about how many people 50 and above are going back into the workplace wanting a new career, a second career, a do-over in many ways. And they are now starting to value things differently, more like really a millennial generation.
Yeah, they really are, because we were so focused on, get a job after college or high school, work for 30 years, retire, and sit on the beach and relax. Times have changed. We can't do that anymore. The cost of living has impacted how we thought we were going to live. So yes, baby boomers are back at work, and they're having to work for a different generation. And it's a struggle with trying to figure out that communication dynamics, those work ethics, and making sure that no one's being offended by anything.
Oh, that's hard.
That's really hard.
That's really, I think that's a big challenge. And the part you said about sitting on the beach and relaxing, that sounds pretty darn good to me, doesn't it? To you?
It sounds good to me too.
Okay, Nick, you also, when you were explaining what you did, added the diversity part. Talk to me about that a bit.
So the diversity part is around making sure that employees know and understand, as well as corporations, that diversity, is an important factor or component when it comes to working in the office. So, 2020 with the George Floyd situation, a lot of people went through these different changes and conversations, and the world was in an uproar. So it sparked an interest in a lot of corporations, and they were looking at their policies and procedures and realizing that they had some gaps in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And so now corporations are really honing in on, do they have policies and procedures in place regarding diversity and inclusion, which is around, making sure that they're hiring the right people, hiring diverse candidates, being more open, being more inclusive, for all to be working together and feeling good about what they're doing. So I've been really busy lately with corporations hiring me and asking me to come in and do some training because they haven't done it, or they have it on their list, but they just haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, and this is only going to become more important. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, much more
There's
important.
no way they're going to be able to ignore this part of their business.
No way, because what they really need to do is make diversity, equity, inclusion a component of their goals and objectives, and not make it a checkbox mentality. So it's something that they're doing every year, but it's not about doing it, but incorporating it into the culture so that it becomes, a part of everyday business. And I think, unfortunately, that's what has happened in the past, is that, HR comes around and there's like, okay, have you done X, Y, and Z? And then they say, we got to do this training. But it didn't allow people to have an open conversation, to feel that they were in a safe space to talk about issues or concerns that were bothering them. And so when the George Floyd issue occurred, things just kind of blossomed, and people were hearing and talking about different things that organizations were like, where did that come from? But that's because employees didn't feel that psychological safety measures were put in place for them.
I think it's one of the things that you mentioned is very, very important. It cannot be a list of boxes you check off. It's got to be part of your culture, your core values, and your beliefs. And until it becomes that, nothing's going to change.
Right.
And let me tell you, that's hard. It's really, really hard. And I think it takes an objective voice.
Yes.
To come in from the outside. And that's what makes you of so much value to corporations and businesses. I don't think it can be done well from within. I think an objective voice is required. I do. Well, we're all blind to what's going on, right?
I would agree, because when I was in corporate as a leader and I had to conduct training for my staff, it was really hard because you have to be objective sitting around the table with your entire staff. And it's I don't know how leaders do it, but I think that it's better to bring someone in, because it takes that pressure off the leader. It allows the staff and everyone around to feel safe, just to have a conversation, to know that they're being heard, and to know that someone cares about what's happening in their life. And that's really the issue and the core of what's going on right now.
So people are sitting around listening to us talk. How do they know they're a good candidate for you?
They know they're a good candidate for me when they're struggling with employee disengagement. When they know that, you're trying to have a conversation with an employee and maybe they're just kind of checked out, or you asking for things to be delivered in a certain time period and they're falling a little lax on their deadline. So there's a gap there. Communication-wise, there's a gap, but productivity. And so having those conversations and bringing me in to do an assessment around what some of those gaps are will help an organization get back on track so they can increase productivity and increase their bottom line. Because right now we're in Q4 and everybody's trying to make sure they meet those numbers, and they want to make sure that employees are happy, and employees want to be happy, so they will return next year.
All right, so folks are sitting back listening to this going, I need to do something. And many of them I know will pick up the phone and call you. But they're going, I'm kind of desperate. I need to do something now. Give folks something practical and tactical that they can do right now before they call you, that they can do today when they're finished listening to you and me here.
One of the things I always share that a leader can do that's very practical and they don't even think about it, but I did it when I was in corporate. Before I would leave on a Friday afternoon or when I came in on a Monday morning, I would take the time to write a handwritten note to each one of my staff members, just to say, good morning, how are you doing? How was your weekend? Or how is your day going? Just to let them know that I cared about them. And that was all. I wasn't asking them for anything to do or anything of that nature, just a nice little note. And it was amazing as to how employees were so appreciative. And then when I would forget, I didn't do it on a Friday, I do it on a Monday, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I didn't get a note. What happened? So that's something that leaders can do today. It doesn't cost maybe $5. Go to the dollar store, get a pack of cards, and just write a nice little thank you note to your staff. Let them know that you care. It will go such a really, really long way.
Just show people that you value them. Takes this much, doesn't it?
That much effort, yes.
Listen, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate it. How do people get in touch with you?
Well, Larry, they can get in contact with me by going to my website, which is lindajordan.com, Jordon. There's no A, not related to Michael Jordan. Or they can send me an email at linda@lrj-consulting.com.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Larry. It's been a pleasure.